Hi, I'm Lydia with Revelation Real Estate, and today in Solving Life's Next Chapter, we have Dr. Vahan, PhD. He was with us a couple of weeks ago. Thank you, Dr. Vahan, for being with us today. So you are the non-native authorized agent for the Navajo Nation when it comes to healthcare and economics,
Yes,
correct?
that is correct.
So we talked last time, we talked a lot about a variety of issues within the Native American community and how healthcare is actually going to help facilitate them getting out of poverty, helping some of their healthcare issues. We had a lot of good feedback from a lot of different people. And so let's talk about some of how you're going to get how we're going to help the Native American communities through the healthcare system. You're in process of completing your fourth book, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And it's called Indigenous Health Crisis, right?
The Indigenous Health Crisis.
So, and you're also getting endorsed by the former tribal healthcare directors right now at this point. So when it's available within, you said about a month and a half, we'll put the link on the bottom so that people can find out where they can buy it from.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about some of the crisis that's out there on the reservations.
Oh, sure. Well, from the last couple of weeks that we did our conversation, the impact was great because it kind of radiated to other sectors in all industries,
right?
Healthcare and pharmacy and to tribal members who are trying to do economic development. Obviously, creation of jobs is necessary in healthcare at the same time. And the reason why I'm trying to finish this fourth book on the indigenous health crisis topic, because it is a crisis, and that's an understatement. We are really dealing with genocide and culturecide, and the reason why I can say genocide and culturecide is, my ancestors went through genocide themselves, through the Turkish government. So I can see genocide when I see it.
Yeah.
And
when you had mentioned that, I thought, is that happening now in 2020? And you said, yes, it is. It's shocking to me.
It is happening, and it's a huge problem that is not being advertised too much. Even the word advertisement could be wrong. Not too much emphasis is not being placed on this national emergency that we have. It could be on the reservation, off the reservation. I'm not even delineating those two, because most of the natives live off the reservation.
Right. We had talked about last time about 80% of them.
Yeah, almost 80%. Live off. But the disparities are the same.
Right.
I mean, they may have access to better health care, but still, the information is lacking. They don't know most of the time what's available for them.
You're right.
What specialties available for them.
Right.
They think they can go to IHS, and that's the only place that they can get their services, not realizing that even a private non-native organization who is very well versed in that industry could help them. So the idea of the book is manifold. I do talk about the issues of today as well as in the past,
right?
And so why it's so difficult for us to solve the native health issue,
right?
And at the same time, I think the solution to the health problem is a huge impact that can be had on the societal and economic development standpoint.
I agree, yep.
Because we have the capability on sovereign lands for us to build hospitals and clinics and to integrate integrative medicine and some of the cures, that is available in Europe and beyond, to eventually come to the United States.
Right.
The United States doesn't really have a medical tourism destination. And the idea of that kind of started when I was trying to implement hospice services within native country.
Okay.
And to bring in all the other solutions that we have beyond of what's conventional in the hospice arena.
Right.
The inclusion of a medicine man in the spiritual care, the use of CBD and cannabis for their ailments, and obviously we know the political games that people and governments and agencies play.
Yeah.
But we understand that CBD and cannabis, it is a miracle drug, if you want to put it that way, with so many benefits, both with or without THC.
Right.
And we can show the world that it does work.
Right.
Beyond of what has been attested already. I mean, we have many medical doctors across the United States and the world who not only have given us data that it works, but also had their sample size to prove it.
Right.
So, I mean, CBD and cannabis helps Alzheimer's patients.
Right.
And many healthcare professionals and even family members know that Alzheimer's patients do not sleep well.
Right.
And that's because they're in pain, but they don't know they're in pain.
Interesting.
That's why they're pacing around. So if they have a CBD or cannabis, they can sleep well.
Right.
And Dr. Lin Nguyen from MD24, he has done research like that. So he has seen the outcome of these things, you see. So.
And I know some of these alternative type medications are not here because of the FDA and some of the rules that are in place. So we found out from you that the last time that the FDA has no jurisdiction on Native American land. So that's huge, and that could bring all kinds of resources, not just to the Native American, but to everybody.
Yeah. So the tribal lands, the sovereignty of these people who we're talking about as far as genocide goes, they have very powerful laws, and once they have the revelation that they do have the power to change things for the better, they will be much more optimistic in creating these joint ventures with the outside for many of the service to come to the reservation. Native country is still the last resort and the last frontier in doing things that we couldn't do on fee simple land. We can bring in medical tourism and all the technology and innovation that is out there. I mean, Europe has been curing cancer for such a long time. Many of our citizens go there to Europe. They go to Panama, they go to Dominican Republic, and then come back. So why not turn that around and have all of them come here?
Absolutely.
And we can start with building, let's say, a hospital, let's say for the children, and also for the veterans, let's say, and we would collaborate with all the physicians, with the technology from the outside, and try to have an outlet on the reservation. Now, this is very scary and maybe threatening to the pharmaceutical companies and everybody else that don't want to see this happening.
They're going to want to stop it.
Yeah, they want to stop it, and that's the trouble. We're not dealing with solutions that we don't have. We do have the solutions. We're dealing with politics and geopolitics and funding and capital, and ironically, within the capitalistic society, even though there is innovation and there's a motivation for innovation, you also have the negative aspects of not allowing an individual or an agency or a group for them to bring in different
that's
methods.
Happened even just with like the cannabis and the CBC. It's CBD oil. It's one of those things where my daughter's a registered nurse, and like she said to me, she said unless the FDA can and the pharmaceuticals can make money off of it, they're not going to.
Well, sure.
They're not going to want that to be a legal type situation.
Well, so. If FDA is the entity that tells people whether it's allowable or not, without any alternatives to their authority, then basically we're just appealing to authority, And same thing goes with everything else. We need to have the opportunity as human beings to really have medical freedom.
I agree.
And Goldwater Institute does just that.
Okay.
So we do want to have institutes like that where they can push on and to really give the freedom to the consumer that these are your options,
Right.
and you can take this if you need to. All the peer-reviewed articles that I have read that goes against, let's say, the use of CBD and cannabis, it's very circular. There's a lot of fallacy behind that. You see that it is endorsed by interested groups for them to say the negative things.
Right.
We really don't need, let's say, for somebody to get high,
Right.
quote unquote, for them to feel the benefits.
Right.
There are many alternatives to
Right.
just smoking that thing.
Right.
I mean, grandma very likely doesn't want to smoke that, but
Right.
there is something that she can take,
Right.
rub on.
And if they extract that oil, it
Yeah.
doesn't make those. It
Of
doesn't
course,
have the same
yeah.
effects.
Yeah. So here's the other thing: when you speak with elders, let's say on tribal lands, some of them are using the terminology of the federal government and the state, calling it a drug, and they're kind of scared to death, not knowing that
Right.
they know better.
Right.
They were the ones that were using this for such a long
For
time.
years. Yeah.
4 years, and so healthcare itself was part of their household.
Right.
They had arts and healthcare and everything else within the household, so
Right.
they were able to get the treatment necessary by their elder for them to
Right.
get better.
And I'm of the opinion that sometimes grandma's old recipe is the better way to go anyway. So
Indeed.
that's how I was raised.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I understand. Let's say we would need some, let's say, other medications as
Right.
necessary. I mean, if you have a headache,
Right.
that you gotta take the Tylenol,
Right.
But when we do have other options that would provide a better solution,
Right.
without the side effects,
Right.
we do have that. It's just a matter of bringing it in, and I think Native Health would show and be an example to others how it actually can be done, and serve as an example also in a city how things can change. For example, we can create a pharmacy on tribal land and then put, let's say, a cannabis store right next to it, and all the things that we don't have right next to each other.
Right.
So that way natives or non-natives can come to the reservation.
Right. Absolutely.
And of course we're talking about capital,
Right.
which is very important because
Right.
let's say if the tribe doesn't have the means to invest capital into that operation, then what we're really talking about is a joint venture with the outside to bring the capital.
Okay.
And I think it's a very important topic, especially at this day and age.
Right.
For example, I haven't met one person throughout the many years I've been working that they really had the guts, the deep pocket and the vision to come to the reservation and say,
Right.
listen, I know that you have a solution, we have the capital.
Right.
Let's come together and do this.
Right.
There's always something missing. Either they don't have the guts to go into foreign
Right.
lands, or they don't have the capital,
Right.
or they don't have the vision.
Right.
So you got to have all those three.
Absolutely.
And eventually we will find that person
Right.
or that group for them
Right.
to take the leap into.
Right.
And the thing is not even unknown.
Right. And you are starting to see the change now,
Yeah.
aren't you? Because, I mean, some of these things that you could bring to the Native American lands could help everybody. And so I think that you're starting to find companies that are willing to do some
sure.
of these joint ventures.
Oh,
right?
definitely. I mean, besides from, let's say, Salt River, where you see both of the sides of the freeway where they lease out to these large organizations for them
Right.
to come.
Right.
What I want to see, what we really are beginning to see, is a larger vision of bringing in solutions, real solutions,
Right.
instead of just retail stores or anything like
Right.
that. Actually, solutions that could impact the current and future generations.
Right.
You're talking about not just healthcare.
Right.
You're also talking about jobs. You're
Right.
talking about eventually the hope and the triumph of these people eventually, that they
Right.
have finally come to a point where now they can thrive again.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
you go from days of abundance, and then you have all these land grabbing and stuff like that happening throughout the years,
Right.
and then people being killed and the disease and so forth.
Right.
I mean, if you look at it from the native standpoint, from the indigenous standpoint, from the First Nation standpoint, they kind of, you can imagine what they have gone through,
Right.
the historical trauma,
Right.
the current situation,
Right.
the change in their diet that has made them obese
Right.
and diabetic and so
Right.
forth, right?
And everything that goes with that.
Everything goes with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you would see fast food places on the reservation, and sometimes you wonder, couldn't they have brought, let's say, a place where they can eat a salad, let's say.
Right.
I'll give you a real example. You may have a huge hospital on the reservation.
Okay.
During lunchtime, the employees go to Burger King. Okay, wouldn't you want, let's say, for them to serve an example?
Right.
That they're coming out of the healthcare facility, let's
Right.
go eat a salad or something.
Right.
Or even a sushi place, for
Right.
example. But you don't see that.
Right.
And that's what I mean. The capital infusion hasn't been
Okay.
utilized very well,
Right.
and the tribal laws haven't been really understood very well
Okay.
for a non-native to
Right.
come and say, you know what, let's do this.
Yes.
I know you're on sovereign land. I really don't care about whether I own that building or not. Let's create a solution for these
Right.
people.
Absolutely.
From a business standpoint, it's very problematic, and I see a lot of greed from that standpoint. Let's say I really want to help these people, and I know that there is money to be made and a very healthy joint venture to be had, right?
Right.
But let's say if I'm going to build a building on the reservation,
Right.
then there's sovereignty. I
Right.
can't really own the building.
Right.
Well, you got to have the heart and the guts and say, you know what, I don't care.
Right.
You are going to have a long-term revenue sharing anyway.
Right.
Why do you care whether you own the land or not? Do
Right.
you really have to be that greedy?
Right.
Because once you do that, it shows that you don't trust the native,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's what it says. If you're saying, if I build that building and it's not mine, how do I know you're not going to take it away from me?
Right.
Doesn't that tell you already that that person doesn't
They
trust the
already
native?
don't trust. Yep.
You see?
Exactly.
You have to look at it from the tribal standpoint too.
Right.
Why are you here? Why are you trying to help me?
Right. Are you really trying to help me, or are you
That's right.
after something else?
That's right.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to be transparent and put the time in and to really understand them, and vice versa. Nobody's
Right.
saying every society has their own warfare. I mean,
Right.
tribes do have their internal conflicts.
Right.
Tribe to tribe or individual tribal person with another.
Right.
That's everywhere.
Right.
But we shouldn't look at that and say, well, they're already having problems already. Why should I
Right.
even help them? Because sometimes they don't know any better.
Right.
In certain respects, they are looking for solutions. They are looking for partnerships.
Right.
They are looking for a person, a visionary, to come and match with their vision
Right.
and say, you know what, let's. I can talk about so many different industries. Why isn't there, let's say, a movie studio
Right.
on the reservation? Why isn't there, let's say, why isn't the New York Film Academy
Right.
have a branch there where it can give the motivation for people to become actors and actresses, let's say,
Right.
directors, producers? I mean,
Right.
you're talking about millions of people
Absolutely.
and their minds and their creativity and
Right.
and a different perspective that they have on society,
Right.
right? I mean, we can give them hope by giving access to all these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bring in a law school, bring in a medical school,
Right.
and stuff like that. So
Yep.
that's what I'm saying. If you don't see a medical school from the outset on the reservation, very likely that they're not doing it because they want to have ownership of that building. I
Right.
mean, really.
It's frustrating to me because I do see a lot of potential with the Native Americans, and nobody has really thought to even go down that road. And when I was in medical sales years ago, I would go to the reservations that had hospitals, and it blew my mind how there were not doctors that were Native American, and that just floored me that they didn't have the opportunities to do those types of things, and to become the doctors and come back to their own communities and help people, or become nurses or caregivers. It was shocking to me when you were here the last time.
Oh yeah, and very few of them graduate medical school for them to become physicians, and And I mean, there is a trend where more and more of them are trying to get into these.
Right.
It's not that they don't have the opportunities. It's just that when they're growing up, they're not growing up on a podium where there is motivation for them to become attorneys and doctors.
Right.
I mean, let's compare to other ethnicities. You know,
Right.
we have others that have a huge concentration of attorneys and doctors, right?
Right.
Well, if you ask them what's happening, why do they become doctors and attorneys? They're saying, well, that's how we grow up.
Right.
They tell us either you become
Their
this
parent
or
or
that.
their grandparent
Yeah.
was.
In other words, it's this.
Yeah.
But on a native side, it's really everything goes
Right.
and anything goes,
Right.
because let's say the parent might not have had access to what it feels to go through medical
Right.
school
Or education in
or
general.
education in general.
Yeah.
And so the child doesn't see the conviction
Right.
in the parent's eyes.
Well, that happens even in our own society.
Yeah.
There's lots of kids that my children are friends with, and we're very big into education at our house. But there's other friends that their families don't see the value of
Right.
it, and it just it's surprising to me because it could better their own children, and they
sure.
just don't see that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they do want to embrace it as much as possible. If you go to tribal seminars, you do have physicians from the tribe that do come in and promote, the use of medical schools
Right.
and law schools.
I would love to see more Native American doctors, nurses,
Oh, absolutely.
caregivers.
Because it's kind of also gives hope to the younger generation too.
Right.
We want to have them be examples of that. And I mean, I have met with several physicians, Native American physicians, and attorneys,
Right.
and engineers and so forth. There are some, and I want to see more of them because they're kind of can be the example
Definitely.
of many. And for them to go around the nation
Right.
and talk to other either other demographics too.
Right.
And I think that it's really time for all the demographics
Absolutely.
and all the ethnic groups to come together.
Absolutely.
This is a huge monster that we're trying to solve and mediate.
Take a little bit at a time.
That's right.
Bite it off
Yeah.
a little. So let's also talk about some of the issues we're in 2020,
Yeah.
and you had mentioned some of the issues that women have on the reservation as well. And let's talk about some of those issues and what are some of the solutions to try to fix some of those concerns. So tell us about some of those issues.
Well, I have a full list, but let's just talk about the missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Okay.
It's a hot topic,
Right.
for the FBI,
Right.
for the local community.
Right.
Congressman Greg Stanton talks about that, which I was in his office, a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And women on the reservation live on a very expansive environment. So in
Okay.
other words, you may have one person and then no other person, several miles away.
Okay.
So they're a huge target for the perpetrators.
Okay.
And how do you solve that,
Right.
Because you can easily go on a reservation and abduct a woman
Okay.
and do human trafficking.
Okay.
The rape, obviously.
Right.
And at the same time, what about the post-rape healthcare?
Right. Absolutely.
Nobody talks about that.
And the
right?
psychologists.
Yeah, mental health and
Yeah.
all that. I mean, let's say physically, let's say a woman has been raped.
Okay.
Where is the Native Health post-rape service? Do we
Right.
know anything?
Right.
We haven't seen it. So that's a huge thing. Now, we spoke with Amnesty International. This is
Okay.
how far we have gone. And they're willing, and we're willing to come together to not only just talk about it, but to implement the solutions, right? How do we start putting in these clinics that would
Right.
address, post-rape
Right.
Native health clinics,
Right.
some resources, where
Right.
to go, and so forth. So why can't we do it, in the United States, in Canada?
Absolutely.
And, speaking with Senator Boyer at the Canadian Senate, she is very heavily involved in curbing the Indigenous, missing and murdered situation.
Right.
The forced sterilizations of women. I don't know if I talked about the forced sterilizations last week.
You
or a few weeks
didn't,
ago.
but we talked about it off air. So
Yeah.
tell us about that. I could not believe that that's
Yeah.
happening now.
Well, between 1973 and 1976,
Okay.
and this is my preface in my fourth book.
Okay.
This is how it starts.
Okay.
And I'm going to summarize it. Between 1973 and 1976, by the endorsement of the U.S. government, Department of Health,
Okay.
and Indian Health Service as a
Okay.
partner, they were promoting the forced sterilization of Native American women.
Wow.
So 25% of the women, of the Native women, I'm not even talking about the African Americans and Latinos.
Right.
They were forcibly sterilized. They would go in for an appendix check and then come out with their tubes tied without a consent.
Wow.
So imagine the psychology,
Yeah.
the mental situation of a woman.
And were they doing that to try to curb from having births? Is that what the whole...
Yeah, they're basically, it's like a eugenics program.
Okay.
They were trying to limit quote unquote undesirables to have more babies. So I even have a brochure from that time that compares a Native family. Let's say it would show a whole gun. It would show 2 children with, let's say, 5 horses.
Right.
And also show, let's say, 10 children and 2 horses.
Right.
It would say if you have less children, you'll have more horses, like more economic development, you see. So that's already very traumatic.
Right.
So even till today, we have women that are trying and they're not unable to have babies, let's
Right.
say. That also has to do with the protein intake and the lack of it and so forth. So, I mean, there are ways for us to bring in protein foods on the reservation,
Right.
and it can help them to have babies.
Okay.
We can solve the infertility problem.
Okay.
So to go back to that, people thought that it's no longer the situation, right?
Right.
Sometimes I would have conversation with people, and they would say, "Well, let's just forget the past, and let's just talk about today. What can we do today?" I said, "Wait a minute. Just last week, in a Canadian hospital, few women were forcibly sterilized again."
Wow. That just...
So that's how I reached out to Senator Boyer, and we started talking about it, and
Okay.
that's how Amnesty International came in.
Okay.
So you realize that if we don't have a check on all these things,
Right.
you have this demographic and everybody else, whatever is called undesirable
Right.
amongst the interested parties.
Right.
This is happening. So this is part of the genocide and the culture side that I'm talking about. And let's talk about culture side too.
Mm-hmm.
When you have no economic development on the reservation,
Right.
Mom just got raped.
Right.
She's taking the kids.
Right.
She's going to a city.
Right.
Now it's obviously a change in their worldview, right? Foreign place, they gotta start again.
Right.
And now the children are growing up away from grandma and grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe grandpa was a medicine man who knew some prayers in their language and their culture and
Right.
language. And now they're away from their culture, right? Isn't there a culture side where you're no longer tied
Yeah.
to your people, and then you grow up, and so it's all very connected. It's very relevant,
Right.
and it happens to all cultures.
Right.
But somehow this special demographic, it needs more emphasis because we're on their lands.
Right.
Whether it's a fee simple land or not, whether
Right.
it's a generational land, we gotta have that sensitivity toward
Right.
the people that even a multi-billion-dollar corporation
Right.
that has its office on these lands were formerly tribal lands.
Right.
And so they're making all the billions,
Right.
and the natives are in the spot.
Yeah.
And the argument that, well, the natives have a casino and they have their own things, well, I mean, that's the least that they could do, right? Why even talk about that where they're still trying to come up from the ashes again,
Right.
like a phoenix?
Right.
And ironically, we're in the city of Phoenix.
And you did talk last time that really a lot of these that have casinos folks outside of the Native American community think that they're making lots
Yeah.
of money off of these casinos, and they're really not making that
Right.
much money.
And I'm glad that Kano has his way of talking about different things at the
Right.
same time, and then
Right.
coming back in full circle of what he meant. But directly, I can say that the casinos actually have a small profit margin.
Mm-hmm.
You might have, let's say, the Seminoles in Florida that have Hard Rock and so forth. That's very special.
Right.
It's a special case, but generally the profit margin is low.
Right.
It can be a management problem. It can be a location problem.
Right.
We have to consider the population size and how
Right.
many people is being distributed.
Right.
But there's more to it. For
Right.
example, just the cannabis and hemp industry alone
Right.
will bring in 20 times the net profit
Wow.
that the casino will have. So why even bother with, let's say, gaming,
Right.
where you can actually start helping the people? Here's the problem. When a tribe creates a casino, it's basically what it's doing is making gamblers out of their own people.
Right.
So I have seen
And that causes more problems.
You see, it's very counterproductive.
Yeah.
You have a casino where 90% of the patrons are native.
Right.
Okay, so they take whatever they get from their tribe, put it in
And
the
then they
slot
put it
machine.
in the slot machine.
So in other words, you're not really
Right.
doing any good.
Well, it's kind of like what you said, the fast food that's on the land.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything for their own people. It's
I mean, if you're going to have a revenue stream,
right.
but it's deteriorating your society
Right.
because of that, I'd rather find something else.
Right.
I mean, look at the photos 100 years ago of Native American women and children and males.
Okay.
They were fit. They looked very healthy. They looked very strong.
Right.
And look at them now,
Yeah.
especially the ones that have been exposed to fast food, have been
Right.
exposed to different diet.
Right.
You see those huge changes.
Right.
And
I think that's in general because there's cultures that were never overweight until they brought in fast
Yeah.
food places,
Right.
and that same thing, same situation.
yeah, and the natives have a special. I mean, their DNA doesn't allow sugar to be processed.
Okay.
They have a special like any other demographic. Every ethnic group has its own genetic issues,
Right,
right? The
right.
sickle cell and everything else, amongst
Right.
others. But for the natives, they cannot process processed sugar and like an apple,
Right.
the fast food and all that. So it kind of changes their DNA, the deformity and so forth.
Right.
And we need to take that into consideration. And I think that the hospitals on the reservation, should take the initiative
Right.
with tribal governments
Yep.
to create a very healthy eating spots to serve as an example.
Yep.
And I think that serving as an example is a good thing.
Right.
To serve example in proper healthcare,
Right.
bring in responsible industries
Right.
to the reservation
Right.
for economic development.
Right.
Instead of creating more and more casinos and resorts,
Right.
let's create a manufacturing plant and bring in, let's say, all these airlines and hire the natives and give them jobs, give them technical jobs, skills that they can use,
Right.
for every area that they expose themselves to.
Absolutely. I love that idea. And I love the fact that you're using healthcare to bring in some of these things. But I agree with you. Manufacturing and other types of businesses
Yeah.
could easily go into Native American community and help facilitate all kinds of jobs and education
Sure.
and programs that have never been.
Healthcare is key.
Yeah.
Unless we solve the healthcare problem, nothing else is going to solve it.
Right.
In healthcare, I mean in the general sense.
Right.
I'm talking about a pharmacy.
Right.
I'm talking about mental health clinics.
Yep.
I'm talking about solutions that the raped women would
Yeah.
have access to.
Right.
Because if you have some economic development going on the reservation,
Right.
right? We're not really talking about cultural insensitivity. We're not
Right.
talking about tarnishing their sacred lands. We're talking about giving them and themselves, giving them access to healthcare,
Right.
healthcare facilities,
Right.
and which means that if you have, let's say, a medical city, right, that means that you have a master plan community.
Right.
You have vibrant cities.
Right.
You have better roadways.
Yeah.
No more ditches.
Right.
And maybe housing for the veterans,
Right.
so that way they don't have to be homeless anymore.
Right.
And by doing that, I think that other tribes will see it as an example
Right.
and create a more stronger intertribal commerce,
Right.
intertribal bond.
Right.
And now maybe eventually we can see the natives who have fled the reservation
Come back.
come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think deep down they want to go back,
Yeah.
but they don't see how they're going to sustain themselves if
Right.
they do.
Right.
That's why you see many natives, they drive even 8 hours over the weekend just for them to see grandma and then come back.
Right.
And if we can solve that, why
Yeah.
can't we eventually, link native country to the city and,
Right.
put to take metros and trains up there.
Right. I agree.
Airports.
Yep.
Why can we have, let's say, a vibrant airport in the middle of a reservation?
Exactly.
It creates tourism. It creates. I mean, last time that we had a film going on was John Wayne on the Navajo Nation.
Wow.
60 years ago?
Yeah.
Why can't we have the same thing going on over there?
Right.
We really don't need to shoot a Cowboys and Indians,
Right.
A movie for this to prosper.
Right.
Why can't we do a documentary?
Right.
Or like a reality show?
Mm-hmm.
Don't we think that there's a better reality show, let's say with the Kardashians?
Right.
I get the Beverly Hills thing,
Yeah.
but don't we really want to show, let's say, a reality show how the natives are?
Right.
So that way, eventually people can go to Pine Ridge
Right.
and see where Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull
Right.
lived.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be productive with,
Right.
with these things.
Absolutely. Well, I think too, just in general, I think because the Native American is so family oriented, traditional oriented, and private, it's just society in general. A lot of us that came from different countries, they used to just stick with their own people, and they used to keep their own traditions and do their own things, and it's getting harder and harder just in society to have that. I took my mom in Scottsdale over the weekend to the Jewish Film Festival, and we watched the making of the Fiddler on the Roof. And the Fiddler on the Roof story is all about traditions and keeping the family together. And it was in a time of war when they were pulled from their country and pulled from their area.
Sure.
And it's very similar to what you're talking about today.
Definitely.
And this movie the play was actually started in 1964, and we're still having those same issues and concerns today too.
Definitely.
So I am just super excited that you came today, and I would love to have you come back. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about, but let's have you come back and let's bring in some of these folks, some of these medical companies that are considering coming here.
Oh, sure.
And when I started telling folks about some of the things that are planned for the future, they were super excited, and these are non-Native American companies and friends that I talked to, and they were like, "Can we have it yesterday?" And I go, "We would love to have it yesterday.
Sure.
It needs to. We need to. There's it's an urgent situation to get these companies here and to start thriving, and because it will help not just the Native Americans, but it will help
overall
everybody.
Yeah, like I said, our solving the Native health issue will solve our national healthcare crisis.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
So I'm glad that you're taking the initiative, and I'm glad that eventually you are going to have all these great sponsorships coming in for you to continue with your program.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, our podcast is all about trying to get resources to folks that, so I appreciate you coming, and we'll have
Thank
you
you so
come
much.
back. So
Appreciate
thank you
it.
for coming. Thanks, Dr. Vahan and PhD. And we'll have Dr. Vahan, PhD, back again very soon. And we will see you next time on Solving Life's Next Chapter.